Welcome to our webcast, How to Execute a Successful IoT Project on Time, on Target, and on Budget. How to Avoid the Pitfalls of Running an IoT Project, sponsored by PTC. I'm your moderator, Mark Hosky, and I'm happy to join you today on behalf of Control Engineering. To get the best results from the webcast platform, please make note of the following as you participate in today's event. If you are having technical problems, click on the question mark at the top right-hand corner of your screen to bring up a list of system checks to make before escalating to an online technician. If you're experiencing issues with your slides or audio, please refresh your browser or click the Refresh Media button directly under the presenter's headshot. You can control the volume settings of this webcast by adjusting the volume on your computer or by adjusting the volume on the webcast platform. If you need a technician, type a message into the Ask a Question box and someone will get to you as quickly as possible. Answers to your technical questions will be answered in the Answered Question box on the left side of your screen. During the presentation, you can use the Ask a Question box on the left side of your screen to type questions for the speaker to answer. You may ask questions at any time during the presentation. The speaker will address any additional topics in a follow-up article to this presentation. To download the presentation slides and a certificate of completion, use the Event Resources tab on the left side of your screen. The webcast is being recorded, including the Q&A session. We'll post an archive on the Control Engineering website in a few days and send you an email with the link to the archive once it's ready. Now I'm happy to introduce today's presenter, Michael Ottoman, Vice President of Digital Solutions at Optimal Design. Michael has more than 25 years in information and technology from tech startups to Fortune Top 20 companies, working with operations, sales, engineering, product development, support services, and executive leadership. Optimal Design Company is an award-winning design, engineering, and IoT services company headquartered in Arlington Heights, Illinois, near Chicago. Michael, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, everyone. I do appreciate you joining us today. So I'm very honored to be here with PTC to present executing a successful IoT project. So a little bit about today's agenda. Today, the goal I have today is really to share the experiences that I've had over 25 plus years in the industry and really chasing data, essentially is what I've been doing. And now that technology itself and the cost of technology and the cost of sensors have come down to a point where IoT projects are now more of a reality, you're seeing, at least in the last 5 years, a very aggressive approach to the market for IoT projects. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about today the reality of IoT in the market space, talk about the forces that are out there, the things you have to think about, and quite honestly, the forces that work against you for a successful IoT project. I'll talk about understanding the complexity of those forces, so really it can help you make a decision on what you want to take on yourself or where you think you need to go externally for that. And then hit on lessons learned or best practices. Again, these are some of these are known and common sense. Others are might be news to you. So, and then we'll talk about successful results and then take Q&A. Again, just to recap, the goal of this is really to help you understand how to avoid the pitfalls of an IoT project and really try to drive to a successful completion. So a number of years ago, about 2 years ago actually, Cisco came out with a very, very good study in the market space on IoT projects. And IoT had around 2016, 2017 really started coming out of Gartner's hype curve. And so you started seeing things move beyond just the pilot or proof of concept phase, and really getting funded and really trying to hit the market. But what that study found out was that about 75% of all IoT projects fail for a number of reasons. And what's interesting is today, that number hasn't gone down all that much. Things are getting better. More and more IoT projects are out there, but there's a lot of people making the same mistakes over and over. What that study determined was that there's really the three of the top five were time, expertise, and budget were the reasons why most of those projects failed, why 75% of those projects failed. So these are some of the challenges you have out there, and we'll go into these in a little more detail. But there's another thing, too, that they captured, which was they did a good job, which was really business and IoT and IT executives really have different perspectives on what's successful. So for business, you have a successful project is really something that aligns to and helps drive a company down its business strategy, where it's going as a company, where it's going to go there. From a business perspective, they look at the business case. Was this something that aligned and addressed a specific business case that we were looking to do? Is this something that integrated with our processes within our company that helped us do business more efficiently? Did the project meet the milestones? And did the milestones bring the return on investment that were made? Very heavy into the financial aspects of analyzing projects, et cetera. For IT, what Cisco found out was what was important to IT and what was determined to be a successful project was really about, was IT itself learning new technologies and staying up with the technology trends? Was the organizational culture there, or were we driving an organizational culture to be able to adopt and move these trends forward? Was there expertise, or did we have expertise within the environment, or did we create expertise within the environment around these technologies? And then did IT expand its vendor relations, its professional network? Did they bring on more relationships in the market space? So simply these two perspectives on what is a successful project, you can see somewhat of a disconnect. And what we'll talk about a little bit in this presentation is the importance of getting both sides of the house working together to drive towards a successful IoT project. So a little bit about those three items that we saw on the previous slide. The forces that, quite honestly, the forces against you are time. Time, and here at Optimal Design, we work on many IoT projects. We do consumer devices from concept all the way through post-production, managing deployment of products, consumer products into the market. We also work on industrial IoT projects, projects that what I like to think of as things that were analog at one time, became digital, and now they're becoming intelligent digital devices. So we get a broad range of experience. We have a broad range of experience, but we get a broad range or a broad view into what is going on in the market space. And I'll try to address this looking at those two unique market segments. Each have their own challenges, each have their own rewards. So for time to market tends to be on what we consider on the consumer products space or intelligent connected products. It's really about how quickly can you find a opportunity in the market space where an IoT solution can be driven out to the market. We have a lot of companies that we've worked with over 17 years that are coming back to for third and fourth generation products, where we developed something before that, again, was just an analog product that they took out to market. It's been doing well. They've come back. They've added some digital functionality to it. Maybe it attaches to an app. But then now, because usually out of market necessity to stay alive in the market space or to stay relevant, they're now looking to expand beyond that, where maybe the app itself on the phone that's monitoring or controlling the device is now sending data back into the cloud. We're using analytics or big data to start pulling in more data and creating useful digital solutions out of that. So time to market tends to be what drives that, and you can spend a lot of time in developing your product and your solution to take it market and only miss the opportunity where somebody comes out there before. Time to value tends to be on the industrial IoT side that we see. People are looking to get something developed that's going to drive efficiencies or better use or better product that they're going to be developing out of as a result of the project. And the importance there is how quickly are they going to get time to value, and is that time to value going to be relevant? The two also tend to have a little bit different timelines. I see IoT has a longer, sort of a longer runway, a little more runway to it, typically because those products have been in the market for a long time, or that industry has been in there for a long time. On the commercial side or on the consumer side, we tend to see things that come in here real quick and have a very short time window where they have to be out and be successful. So some of those working against you from a time is either somebody will overcommit to the deliverables for that and not be able to achieve that, or underperform against a set of deliverables that they could have if they were more skilled or experienced in that. Unidentified inhibitors, long lead time components. Unidentified inhibitors to success can be simple things of whether or not there's long lead time components, or you don't have multiple vendor strategy for individual components that are going to go into an electronic device, and you have to wait for that to happen. Those are things that are very difficult to manage, and they do happen. You can get hit by things like tariff, right? If you're trying to hit a specific price point in the market space, it could be that you didn't calculate into what would be the impact of a tariff or on specific components that are either being bought or manufactured overseas. And then lack of defined requirements. We see this all the time, where the excitement is to execute the project based on a set of minimal requirements, thinking that you'll be able to expand on those requirements and gather those as you're going down. It's important to have milestones, and not having or a lack of defined requirements typically is seen by missing milestones, not achieving your predefined milestones. So then target. So what is the target? Target is really where you're going to hit, where you're going to enter into the market, what you're going to have completed. That's what you define as your end result or your deliverable. We see a lot of missing the target through things like scope creep and feature creep. It's easy to do on the digital side, where you can add things very quickly, especially if you have tools like PTC ThingWorks, being able to go into Composer and very quickly develop applications and try new things out. It's not, it doesn't impact you that much to a project there, but if you're doing scope creep and feature creep to designing of a hardware product, whether it be a board, a device, a widget, whatever it is, that can get very expensive and very time consuming, and you can find yourself going back and doing other iterations in some specific cycles. So those are areas where we see missing the target. Requirements and change management. Traditionally on the IT side, we're very strong in that type of discipline. Especially on the consumer products, you tend to see people come to us with projects that have skipped steps, and that's been part of the failure of it, and we have to sort of rewind it, go back and make sure those steps in the process are completed, including understanding what the changes are, who's approving the changes, et cetera. Some stuff that IT might say is common sense, and it might be missing in other parts of the organization. And then project management and program management. I'm a true believer in these things are two separate disciplines, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but really your project management, you can have multiple project managers on a project, and we'll go into the depths and complexity of a project, but you can have multiple project managers doing different phases within a project or different areas of expertise in those projects, managing those sub-projects, but you really want a program manager doing the overarching high level from beginning to end of the product, and that's really the person that's driving common communication across all business lines. It's also ensuring that the product itself has somebody looking at it from a view of what was the original state and the end state, because too many people can get lost in the woods by not looking essentially back, further back at the force itself or at the project as a whole. Budget, this is really big to me. Constantly, you get people coming in here that are, 2-3 times over budget, and now it's an emergency, and their career are on the line because they don't have a deliverable. They've gone back to the well too many times, and they're trying to ask us to go ahead and fix it, get it to market, and drive that out. Budget is so important, and there's some fairly easy things you can do early on that will help you stick and manage to a budget, or at least prevent having painful surprises. And this is really something that you look at from beginning of the project, from concept. You need to have a finance person or be financial savvy throughout the project, all the way through to, quite honestly, post-production into a DevOps environment and understanding your costs throughout that. Cost overrides in one area of a project can be mitigated by either reducing a deliverable or reducing a feature or a function and adding that into a roadmap versus a deliverable at the beginning of a project or at the beginning of the launch. We'll talk a little bit about sort of the pro and cons and the different aspects of the physical and digital creation. This is actually an example of our company. Optimal Design has a broad range of engineering expertise under its roof. Our founders of the company are still here today. They're still actively involved in the company on a day-to-day basis. And they've grown the company out of necessity. And the necessity has been, what can we do to continually help drive the customers forward into a successful environment? And what we have found over the years are the importance of having that under one roof, having the ability to have control of that under one roof is very helpful. And I'll talk a little bit about the reasons why for that. But these are some of the disciplines that happen. In a lot of these, the way these are categorized, sometimes you'll find projects where they'll outsource pieces of this. They might go outside for industrial designers, or might have industrial designers in-house, have mechanical engineers in-house, but use an outside firm for electrical engineers. Even though we have all these disciplines, we do work in that fashion. We have just found, out of necessity for success of our customers, that it makes sense to pull it under one house. Things like having a full prototyping and micro-manufacturing facility allows us to make quick change and not have to get into the back of the line and wait 6-8 weeks for a prototype facility to run some small changes to parts, or pay through the nose to get those parts changed so that we can stay on time and on budget. So we've been over years being able to pull all these different disciplines in-house. It's been really successful. It drives beyond, but this is essentially a handful of the disciplines on the physical side of the house. Your industrial designers typically look at something from an ergonomics perspective. They analyze how people are going to use it, how the interaction is going to take place, where it needs to be. They draft that up. They ensure that look and feel falls within the corporate's vision of how they want to see their products work. And then they tend to work closely with mechanical engineers that then take those designs and drawings and then map those out through CAD and other products, Creo, to create the working models of what those products are going to be. While that's going on, the mechanicals are then working with the electrical engineers to ensure that the boards and the pieces that are being developed there will fit inside the housing that the designers have designed. One of the nice things is, by having it all under one roof, if there's a change throughout that process, those engineers can get together in less than an hour, discuss the change, make the modifications, and then go back into the process itself. Once that electrical engineering is done, they're working hand in hand with the software engineers. And then those software engineers, when those four disciplines get together, you typically start out with a small prototype. We like to think sometimes we'll do very quick run Frankenstein prototypes where it has nothing to do with the look and feel, has nothing to do with the mechanical design or manufacturability, but is really about getting to data faster. And that's really to feed the digital creation piece of it. But once the prototype or the Frankenstein prototype is developed, you're really taking that back to your shareholders, to your stakeholders, and making sure that those people understand where you're going with this, and they see it beyond the whiteboard, beyond the slides, and are now starting to see it transform into something. That communication link back will always be important, and the more often that you can do it, the better results you'll have towards a project. So all of these disciplines, engineering disciplines, do work together in an ecosystem, and the closer they are tied together, the better. There's also budgetary reasons for this as well that we can go into. Traditionally, if you're outsourcing components of it, there's typically a budget for what is scoped within that component. But if you're taking an entire project to a design firm, they can work with you through flexibility in budgeting, so that in some cases you might save money in an area where you come under budget in mechanical or industrial design work, but you might find that savings can add more components into your electrical engineering design, so you can have more sensors added into the design early on, and then depopulate those sensors today to reduce your bill of materials price, knowing that if you needed that functionality and feature later on, it's just a matter of adding those components back to it. It's already been engineered into the boards or engineered into the designs themselves. It's a very good strategy for driving the length of your product into the market space as well. So on the digital side of the house, which is traditionally where my background has been, you have your UI/UX application designers, your application developers, system architects, and implementation engineers. Then you get into things like managed services with network operations, and then customer support services as well. We have found it almost a necessity to our customers is as they're driving products out into early phases into production, it's important that we can tie our call center into their call center. So if they have problems in the field, they can take first call. If that problem is determined to be some beyond the initial triage, where we need to get our engineering involved, their tickets can escalate into our system, and then we can get the appropriate engineers that were on the project involved very quickly. Again, it's really about driving efficiency and speed and ensuring that we're part of the success with our customers. But an example of these different components are you've got your UI/UX application design. Now, a lot of times our digital designers will work with our industrial designers to ensure that the physical look and feel and use of a product is going to translate seamlessly into the digital view of that product, whether it's an app on a phone, an app on a website, or some interaction of such, to ensure that the customer has that common look and feel across their entire product line, because now their products have expanded the physical into the digital space to create a holistic solution. Application developers, your traditional sense, they'll take that data, they'll start making that data into a meaningful way to bring that data back, getting involved into analytics, and really making everything meaningful. System architects and implementation engineers, these are the ones that are really our cloud engineers, or in some cases we'll do on-prem architectures as well, especially early on if you don't understand if you don't understand your data traffic patterns and how much data you're driving. You might want to do a proof of concept in the market space using an on-prem system so that you can get a data transmission profile. And then through that data transmission profile, then you can take that information back into a financial model and determine, is your product going to be financially viable if you move it out to the cloud, and you have to now consider the amount of traffic that's passing back and forth. And then again, network operations, these are the guys that keep everything up and running, and then customer support is really about ensuring that those tickets are captured, that the customer satisfaction stays high. If there is an issue, if an outage, that is all pulled together. So again, all these different components on the digital side work together, as well as they work with the physical side as well. So on a typical IoT project, we do track and manage quite a bit of, so that we as an organization can get more efficient in how we do things. We understand the different components and where they enter into projects from a traditional sense. So if you view this diagram, this is taken over multiple projects and sort of an average of that and where we see, and really helps us drive best practices of when we should engage. We have multiple phases, traditionally a define phase, a design phase, a develop phase, a refine phase, and then we go into a launch phase. And then from a launch phase, you're typically into production, and now you're moving into more of the digital space where you're doing support from a call center support, but from a managed services, you're keeping the system up and running, and then you're carrying that over. We traditionally move into a DevOps model at this point, where software or applications are updated quickly and then run through our development or test, and then we move that out and quickly promote that into production. Quite honestly, the PTC ThingWorks environment is ThingWorks suite of products is something that we've adopted as a center of excellence around this, which made a lot of sense because we have been PTC users of products on the engineering side for decades. And so as we went out and did our analysis to determine what best platform on the digital side of the house should we really focus on, and we do other platforms as well. But what we did internally is we said we're going to build a center of excellence around PTC ThingWorks because it has so many different components that integrate into our entire organization. It's very simple to use, and it really drives and reduces the amount of time to development and really about getting your products to market, and gives you a lot of flexibility as well. So here you have, in the design phase, you'll have a lot of different engineers. Traditionally, your industrial designers and your UI UX people will start out there to really understand what the customer is looking for, bring in expertise around mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, the traditional disciplines to get an understanding of it. And as the project progresses and as the product progresses down, there's more and more time spent with other engineers. And you'll see we've actually learned it's really important to start getting your managed services folks in much earlier in the project, albeit not a lot of overhead for it, but earlier into the project to understand the expectations of the product going forward. They work on things like making sure the system is designed to perform as well as scale, so that you don't launch from POC right into production and realize that you've underestimated your infrastructure, and then you've blown out your budget, your cost. Also, we've learned to start bringing in the call center or customer services earlier as well, because they can start grabbing the questions and the Q&A and the problems and start coming up with the resolutions and really start building the knowledge base that we can do for our customer support, can use for self-help, or be able to very quickly answer questions so that when the customer launches to production, they have all that information already there, and we can transition either that information over to our customers if our customers want to use their call center, or if they want to integrate with ours, they can have access to that through our call center as well. So important diagram to us. It helps us in our planning. It also helps us provide our customers in reality, hey, this is what you're going to look at from your projects in the traditional sense. You'll have a lot of firms out there, especially firms that are boutique firms in one area or another area. They're all fighting after your wallet share. They want a slice of the pie, and they want the biggest slice of the pie. So what's important to them is going to be those specific areas. And they're not going to have a room to budge in those. They're not going to have that flexibility to say, we're going to look at this holistically as a whole pie versus just our slice of the pie. And then we can always shift things over if we're seeing overruns in mechanical. Is there a way, is there a budget, is there features and functions that we can drive out? Do we go back and make changes associated with design to ensure budget? Is it something we can toss to a roadmap? On the digital side, we tend to throw a lot of things out to a roadmap because with DevOps, you can add those very quickly after you hit your milestones. And again, what we found too with DevOps and PTC ThingWorks, it's amazingly easy to integrate that methodology into that platform, as though it was almost designed to do it, even especially if you're another PTC users of things like Creo, where you can pull that information into it and then drive that out, drive changes to that from a digital perspective, but also how that can impact based on the data that's coming off the physical, and really go back and impact designs as well for next-gen products. So this next phase of rolling into is really sort of the lessons learned or the best practices, and I've kind of gone into some of those throughout this, but these are really the top. You know, you had the David Letterman days. I'm kind of aging myself there, although 25 plus years in the industry will probably do that anyways. The David Lettermans of the world had the top 10 on the list. This is kind of what that is in a sense. So situation awareness, it's so important right from the beginning to take the time and understand. You might have a great idea on a product or want to go something on the industrial IoT side of the house. For a product, taking it to market, take the time really to understand your market. Work with your marketing people, work with your sales people to understand, is there market viability? determine where the path is into the market, and then go beyond that, understand, are there others in this market going after that same piece of real estate in the market as you are? And if so, are they going to go after it really fast? Do they show a history of that? We tend to see larger companies, and I worked at many large companies, take a long time to take a product to market. Younger, more nimble companies can do that much faster these days. And so really understand and look beyond just the big guys, see who's out there in the market space talking about it, see what the chatter is on social media for something like that. Take the time to do that. Your marketing staff is there. They're really good at this type of thing. Take advantage of that. Determine the time to market, the time to value. So know your financial targets. What's really important is knowing that there's an opportunity in the market, but also knowing at what price point can you go into the market and be viable in that market. That is so important, and that is your marketing people can do that. We have people that do market analysis as well, so if you don't, you can always come. We can work on that for you as well. But you usually know your industry the best, and so going after that, what you're going to need to understand. And on the industrial IoT side of the house, also understand, is that something that maybe it's something that your machine vendor, we have our prototyping facility. A lot of those things we can actually grab data to and help us improve our prototyping facility or prototyping house, our manufacturing facility. But some of that stuff your vendor's already doing, and it's going to come out in the product anyway. So work with your vendors to see if that's there. If it's not there, it's really about connecting those products together. Some of the things that ThingWorx has allows you to do that on the industrial IoT side is pretty amazing. Makes it very simple to do, and you can get some very quick hits. You just need to understand what you're going to invest, what's going to be the cost of that, how quickly am I going to get that value back on that, and create that roadmap and set that up. And then define your minimum viable product. Really separate the needs versus the wants. And I constantly do this. I do a lot of workshops around IoT where I will sit at a huge table with a lot of executives, a very expensive meeting if you're thinking about the amount of time that people are out of the office in this thing, and we will get so excited into the IoT space, and I just sort of watched this happen, that at the end of it, we were able to solve world hunger. But you know what? We couldn't deliver on anything because nobody could chunk it down into a space that was manageable, deliverable, that had timelines associated with it, milestones and everything else. So you really have to sort of control that, and the best way to do that is determine what your minimal viable product is. And that exercise where you're saying, we can do a lot more, but what do we actually need? And to break out your needs versus your wants. What do we actually need, and let's build that and get that to market. You can add on other components throughout the process of the design, but really determine what is that bare bones minimum that you need to get to the market. That'll help you with time, it'll help you with budget as well. On the industrial IoT side of the house, there is a minimal viable product when you're working in that space, and it's really about focusing on getting that time to value. When do you need that? When do you want to get that into the marketplace, and ensure that you're not setting expectations for delivering that are too great or too grandiose, that you're actually not going to hit that in reality. So the other thing is assess your capabilities and experience. And this, you actually have to be really honest with yourself. And I tell this to the executives is, yes, change your conversation or change your question from can you do this to have you done this? That simple change in the way you approach that from a capabilities perspective can really help you understand, well, look, I know you can do it. I'm confident you can do it. You're confident you can do it, but you've never done it before. Maybe we can pair you up with a firm that has done that before that'll help you learn it, live it, breathe it, and then the next one you can take on yourself, but you can move. Because these projects can be very expensive, and they can be a great place to learn, but companies aren't necessarily paying for you to learn on their dime with a project that fails. You hear fail fast, fail often. If you're going to fail on something, fail it in the conceptual design. Fail it in the market analysis space. Don't fail it when you get all the way down a full functioning prototype that's designed for manufacturing and into your small runs manufacturing. Very expensive. Take that time ahead of time. Be honest with yourself. Determine if you have the skill sets needed to do it. If you do, then yes, by all means. You might find you're really good in certain areas and you just want to augment those other areas that I outlined before, the other disciplines. That's a great approach to take. In that case, you might also want to bring in somebody that has oversight or a view into the holistically of where you're wanting to take this, because that's a different level of experience also. And that's really the project manager / program manager concept. Determine your requirements, your assembled product costs. Understand that yes, you do get greater buying power with the more units you buy, but you really have to get up there into the tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands really to drive your component costs down. Understand what regulatory requirements are out there or certifications that you have to meet. If you have to get something UL certified, understand those are costs there. There's a time there. There's maybe a different way of engineering something to meet a certification than it would not to meet a certification. So get these things early into your design and your project discussions. Ensure that you're moving that conversation forward. Secure executive sponsorship. And quite honestly, I recommend to everybody secure it on both sides of the house. Your business side of the house, where obviously we actually see more projects coming, IoT related, coming out of the business side or the marketing side of the house than we do out of the IT side of the house. But make sure you have both sides of the house from an executive sponsorship secured, and then communicate to them often. The more you communicate, the better. Some other things are assemble your partners and your vendors. Every company has their own partners that they like, they want to use. There's relationships. They're already on the approved vendors list, everything else. Find out those gaps, bring in those other partners, get that stuff processed, get them on the approved vendor list, and then bring them all together with a vision of overarching of what you want to do. Now, some people will say, well, I only want certain partners to know certain pieces. That's fine. At some point, you'll see that certain partners have a critical mass in the success of your project. So they're critical to the success of your product, and they have critical mass as part of the budget of the project. Bring those partners into, put the NDA in place, make sure they're aware of where you want to take this, what you want to do, because a lot of them are working on other projects, and they can say, well, had I known you wanted to go into that market space or driven that, there's some things we've learned from other projects that are in similar spaces or similar type projects that we can apply to this. Or you didn't know that IP60, IP55 doesn't work, you need IP67 in that space. So having them understand where the project is and where it goes, and then do a discovery phase with all of them. The better they work together, the better it is your project's going to move forward. Review your budgetary proposals. This is important from a whole bunch of things, right? Again, I talked about a boutique shop might want to own as much of the slice of the pie as they can, and then they're going to try to control that throughout the project life cycle as well. So what I always say is look holistically at the overall project itself from beginning to end. Budget, put together a large budget for that, and then chunk that down into phases, and then budget and manage to those phases. So phase 1 has a budget of X, phase 2 has a budget. And then when you go out for your quotes and everything else, work within that. Very important. Typically, we'll do a high-level sort of an umbrella budget for the project based on how we see it, and then we can provide a fixed-price proposal for different phases. Usually, we don't go past phase 2 or 3 on a fixed-price proposal because we've just learned things change throughout that. And as long as you're sticky throughout the process, that'll help. But make sure if you're doing fixed-price proposals for your phases, make sure you negotiate a time and material price up front over the scope of the whole project. Because the worst thing you can do is say, okay, we're months into the project with this one partner on a fixed price. They come back to us, and because we did scope creep or feature creep or whatever, the fixed price is now over. They're now moving into a time and materials basis, and you go into a very high rate for time and materials. It's hard to go back to your sponsor and ask for more budget if you didn't plan for this, or at least be able to make them aware of it before it actually happens. Plan to review the phases itself and project of the project, and project your success or your milestones out to your shareholders as much as you can, both from a financial perspective but also from a technology perspective. And then assign key internal resources, right? Program managers we talked about, project managers, business leads, technical leads. The different sort of components, or the components of the business that are going to be using the end product or benefiting from the end product upon launch. Make them aware about what's going on. Make them part of the process, because at the end of the day, if they're happy, if they've been a part of the development of it, even from an advisor or an influencer perspective, when it launches, there's going to be a better chance of it being the right product and being successful if they've had some skin in the game. My favorite is financial modeling. If you don't do this internally to your companies, I highly recommend you do. If your finance people know how to do this, they know how to think this way, you don't need a major accounting background to do this, but it's going to take all pieces to work together. Build out a financial model that just doesn't work for taking a product to market. Have it work all the way from concept into prototyping, into development, all the way through essentially launch and support beyond that. Put that together, run scenarios against it. If you don't know what your costs are going to be, both non-reoccurring and reoccurring expenses, use assumptions. There are market assumptions out there. We use assumptions based on feedback of our projects as a whole, and then we eliminate those assumptions as we move forward with the customer and continue to fine-tune our financial models on behalf of the customer. Make sure you get human capital in there, both for during the project as well as for post-project support. A lot of times, especially if you're an analog company that's moving to digital, that's going to really shooting for moving to a product as a service type of vision, you're going to have to know that moving into that reoccurring revenue stream is going to have a cost. It's also going to have new skill sets that are going to be added to your team, understanding what those roles are and how much they are from a salary perspective, from a benefits perspective. All that stuff should go in there. You might find, due to your company, the way it's set up, that you're doing portions of that and your finance has overall control of that, but you're usually going to have your sponsors from your team wanting to know that. Secure executive commitment and financial budget. Again, constantly go back and let them know, no surprises, right? From kickoff all the way beyond. Continue through communicating to those stakeholders, especially if you're going to go over. If you find yourself adding new features and functions to that, your financial model is going to be able to tell you 3 months from now, I'm going to be out of budget for this phase when I thought I was going to go 6 months. So in order to do this, I need to go back to my financial stakeholders and say, the additional features and functions you added are going to add this much to our cost. For us to continue 3 months from now, 3 months from now, I'm going to need an additional budget added to my to the additional funding added to the budget. That gives them that time to go ahead and figure out how they're going to do that. Money is not free. It's going to come from a different business unit. It's going to come from somewhere. It's just not sitting around. Companies use money. So the more time you can give your financial stakeholders to figure that out, and they might come back and say, okay, we actually don't need that function, continue down the path on the budget that you're on. So manage to that. And then I've got this in here real quick, just honestly, optimal design. What we did is, it's very difficult for us when a customer comes in here to say, show me an example beginning to end of a customer that you're doing, and we can show you certain things that we're doing with customers, but NDAs and everything else, we really can't show you, open up the nuts and bolts of everything, show you financial modeling, show you the different pieces of it for customer projects of ours. We respect that. We would respect that if you were a customer as well. So our executive team, our founders of the company, have done a great job at investing in the company itself. A little over a year ago, we agreed that there's a bunch of car people here, so we all have something in common. We agreed really to look at a market segment that was getting squeezed in downward margin pressures and really looking for efficiencies in the market and how they can either make more or do things for less. We really focused in on the automotive industry, looked at our internal skill sets, assessed where we were, determined, hey, this would be a great use case that we can go from concept all the way through manufacturing, through production and support, and everything else. We took a group of engineers, pulled together. We went through the whole process I outlined today. In less than 9 months, we actually had product in the field. And now I'm happy to say that we're actually in production within the Midwest, in different phases of production within rolling it out in the Midwest. It has a lot of excitement around it. It's Optimal Tracks, optimaltracks.com if you want to check it out. But this used every single component that our company has to offer, including vendor relations. But there's one thing to note. Our ability to get this to market is so incredibly fast. Really had to do with our partnership with PTC and their ThingWorx platform. Not only did it integrate into a lot of the other components of PTC that we're using that we could take advantage of, but it allowed us to, at the same time this was going on, ramp up the skill sets utilizing PTC's customer success program to ramp up our skill sets around a center of excellence while we were building out a product to take to market. We have successfully done that. Very proud of the product. I'm really proud of the whole team, and quite honestly, we couldn't do it without PTC. The people at PTC, amazing. Our account team is phenomenal. The support team is phenomenal. The customer success team has been phenomenal. And ThingWorx is phenomenal. So I'm very happy to say that, very proud to say that. So I think with that, I believe we're going to go back over and go into Mark. I think we're going to do QA.
Great. Thanks very much, Michael. Let's just go to the Q&A slide next. We'll move on to there. With the Q&A session, the audience listening can type questions for today's presenter in the Ask a Question box on the screen. And then within a few days, the presentation will be available for on-demand viewing. We'll post the archive on the Control Engineering website and send an email message with a link connecting directly to it and to related resources, including answering any additional questions and topics after it's ready. So now we're on to the questions. So in the physical and digital diagram, you showed application development as being less of an effort than software development. Can you expand a little bit more on that?
Actually, yeah, so that's a really good question. I tried to cover it a little bit in that discussion. So if you saw that, software development carried over quite a bit through that, a fairly large triangle associated with it. That is, software development is more the physical piece of it, where application development is more the digital piece of it. The reason why that's shorter is traditionally, for us, has been the tools that we've chosen. So we are, like again, I talked about the ThingWorx platform. That allows us to very quickly create a digital twin of our vision early on, create some data around that, and start creating meaningful applications. While they might not be our UI, UX application people, we can take those back to our shareholders or stakeholders, those people that are funding the project, explain to them what we talked about from a vision perspective. Here's an example so that they can actually see how that works. And then throughout that phase, we can go back to reiterate that. And we usually then get into, I talked about where industrial designers and UI, UX designers work together. Then we get into that phase, and that's more where you start building the applications out and move that. But it truly is having a platform that allows you to quickly use the tools inside the platform itself, and the flexibility in there to then be able to drive very quick application development. And again, application development, a little misleading on that slide. It looks like it ends. It never does. It moves into another phase, which is post-production, into sort of a DevOps phase of it as well. So while software development, software engineering on a hardware device, it's very time-consuming, takes a lot, and you learn a lot, and you're constantly going back to it as you're taking the physical device out into the field and moving it from prototype, or from Frankenstein prototype into a prototype into an early access device. You're learning through that whole process. You're involved, and you're constantly doing the firmware and the hardware, software. So hopefully that's a good answer.
Great. Project management, always part of any project, and I would imagine with IoT especially. Do you recommend using project management services from an engineering and development firm, or should a company undertake that internally?
Good question. So it depends on the scope of the project itself. And this is where, if you have project management and in-house expertise around specific disciplines from an engineering, mechanical engineering, maybe you do a lot of that, or maybe electrical engineering, and you want to use your inside resources and you have a project manager there, by all means, yes, we work with that as well. If you're going to do multiple disciplines through a design engineering firm, this is the importance of that program manager. But I would suggest, if you don't have, while I know project managers can manage projects without having expertise in the technology or function set that they're managing within, it really does help if you have experienced project managers in that area. It could be within the mechanical engineering, electrical engineering phase that have manufacturing experience, and so they can carry forward, ensure that projects stay on target, be able to foresee problems they're going to have, and be able to communicate that to those other either outside vendors or internal organizations as well. So I hate to say it, but it depends. I highly recommend you assess that early on, and don't just assume we're going to use inside project management. You might use a combination of the two.
Good, thank you. So how confident are you with initial budget assumptions, and how often do you redefine deliverables on any given IoT project? And I would imagine that would be with somebody working with you or working on their own project too.
Yeah, so where we redefine deliverables, that's always with the customer, right? The customer always signs off on what that deliverable is going to be. We go back and say, if you're bringing that on, it's going to extend this out. So that conversation is ongoing. The initial budget, and this is where I can't emphasize enough, spend the time, do the homework, do the legwork, work with your finance people, put those things together, really define what that's going to be. The success is driven not just that the widget works and the data comes off the widget and we deliver something. Success to the finance organization is, did you deliver that within the budget that we wanted so we can get that return on investment? So we are very confident in our ability to budget holistically across a project. Now, again, if you're bringing in outside firms for different components with it, we'll put the little asterisk next to it and say this portion of it, or this portion of this phase of it, was something that we didn't budget for, or we didn't go out and get quotes for, or we didn't come up with the level of effort for. But that doesn't mean that we can't go back, get that information, put it back in the tool. We have a very complex financial modeling tool. We have a lot of data based on real use cases, and that data maps back to assumptions and costs. We put those assumptions in. We use third-party assumptions, telco assumptions, for data transmission, if you're using cellular, LoRa, whatever the components are. We bring those into the mix, and then we monitor that. And it's not a one-time and done. You constantly go back to the tool, and you're constantly updating it. You're removing assumptions. You're going back and finalizing it. You're getting your data transmission profile, understanding that your cellular bill is going to be twice as high as what you thought it was going to be. What's that going to look like holistically? Is our end state product still going to be at the right cost that we can and drive it to market? If it's not, is there somewhere we can drive down? So it is a workshop and it's an effort, but it's a reoccurring effort that we do with our clients.
Sure. Next question, how do you go about choosing the right platform to begin developing on? So that could mean a few different things, but maybe you could clarify.
Maybe that was, so we chose we evaluated ThingWorx against many other platforms. I did a startup in my history, which go to LinkedIn, I'm sure you can see, but I did a startup where we created an IoT platform. I lived it and breathed it and told myself I would never do that again. There are companies out there like PTC that build great ones and have hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people supporting it, and the amount of development that goes on. That market consolidated, and the winners are PTC and a few others out there for IoT platforms. So what we looked at were analysts, we looked at cost, we looked at relationship, we looked at expertise internally, and we looked at ease of use. Those things came into play in the assessment. We started out a fairly large, about 9, brought it down to 3 in-house, and then went through the evaluation of the 3. Interesting enough, one of the things we like best about the ThingWorx platform is it can be on-prem or in the cloud, while a lot of these cloud vendors, which we're partners with, only force you to be up in the cloud. And we know just out of experience that when you're looking holistically at cost, Sometimes the cloud isn't the cheapest thing, depending on how much chatter your device is going to have. So it allowed us that flexibility. So take the time, if you don't have one, go through an evaluation process that you feel comfortable with. Gartner has evaluation tools. I think IDC does too as well. So if the question was pertaining to the platform, the IoT platform we use, that's the evaluation. So there you go.
Good. A lot of the presentation had to do with effective communication. How often should people communicate in a project? How often would your team communicate with the customer in a project?
So we do at minimal on a weekly basis, and we do a PSR project status report. Our project managers will lead that. Typically, we have leads from the discipline, engineering discipline. We'll have a mechanical lead or electrical lead or whoever's involved in that portion of the project will be part of that team, provide the feedback, get the input. And then I know as an individual, the engineers are somewhat on a daily basis involved with those customers as well. But from on scope, are you hitting your targets and your milestones, that is done on a weekly basis. And we take pride in how well we communicate. But I can't emphasize enough, you need to have the communication for it to work.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for the great questions. We'll try to get to as many of the unanswered questions offline as we can, and then post those results with the archived webcast. Thanks again to our presenter, Michael Ottoman, for sharing his time and expertise. We'd ask you to hang on for just a minute more. We want to use your expertise to tell us how we did. In addition to thanking PTC for sponsoring today's webcast, the exit survey will pop up on the screen when the webcast ends. So take a minute to complete it. We like to use the information to improve our webcast. To receive the certificate of completion, please click on the Event Resources tab on the left side of your screen, and then click on the link. The link will break once the webcast ends. Thanks again to Michael and to PTC and Optimal Design. On behalf of CFE Media and Technology and Control Engineering, thanks again for attending the webcast. This concludes our presentation. Thank you and goodbye.